Welcome back to GMBA 71202 Data Analytics for Decision Making, and in this module 1B we're really looking at graphs, graphical analysis, and we're going to consider pie and bar charts, histogram, line plot, scatter plot, and some ideas around what makes a good graph in general. Before, in parts C and D, then we'll look at descriptive methods and ethics, but now this module is all about graphs. So let's get into it. Firstly, pie and bar charts. Very popular, well-known, easy to do in Excel, and they're appropriate when you have data that can be naturally categorized in a meaningful manner. So thinking about qualitative variables, for example, or key groupings. Classic example might be budget. So, the amount of budget could be divided into how much for research and development, how much for marketing, how much for general operations, administration, etc. We have key meaningful categories. But we're talking about graphs, so let's have a look at one rather than see text. Well, here's an example of a pie chart. For example, we have a fund, a mutual fund, Adrian Fund, and this is 2011 performance, and this is a pie chart for the investment strategy. So our money gets divided up into 10% cash, 20% international stocks, 30% domestic, or 30% domestic bonds, 40% domestic stocks. So it's a nice way to sort of visually see the components and how the different investments. So that would be a pie chart. The same information could be displayed on a bar chart. And here we have labels for each of the columns. What you might like to do on a bar chart, depending on what you're trying to highlight, is order them so that you can see, okay, domestic stocks, then bonds, then international stocks, then cash. It's pretty easy with 4 columns, but if you had some more columns, it might be a bit harder to see the ordering unless you order it for the reader. Now, notice some key things here. I have axis labels, so proportion of total investment I have on the axis label. And I have a nice chart title, and see those, also the labels on the bars, 40%, 30%, 20%, 10%. You could have those, or sometimes you don't have those. And in this example, notice I've also changed the axis, it's the amount invested. But notice it takes a little bit longer to say international stocks, how much? I've got to go across there, it's $40 million. Whereas if it had it just above, like before, when we go back, we had that information written above the bars, it was a bit faster. Again, it depends on what you're trying to highlight to the reader. If the actual value is important, you might like to include that. But if it's more about comparing between and the actual values, it's just relative values are more important, maybe you don't. But again, information to think about. Do I display that? How don't I? That's key information here. But I think hopefully we're pretty safe with and pretty familiar with pie charts and bar charts. So we're going through those fairly quickly. So just to recap, pie chart, the size of each slice of the pie is proportional to the size of the category it represents. So bigger slices, bigger chunks, bigger amounts, bigger shares. Now that highlights the proportion of the whole, naturally. You can see sort of how much of the pie, or the pizza, if you like to think about it, that you are contributing to. For example, again, if it was that budget idea, how much of the overall company's budget is your division taking? And you can clearly see that. Bar chart, it uses bars instead of slices, and it's a bit easier to compare categories to see which one is bigger. And I'm going to go back here just to highlight that to you. So let's just go back for a moment. Now have a look at this. Without the text, it takes a while to determine that the blue category is bigger than the red. Just looking at the pie, you're like, yeah, it is a bit bigger. But immediately, when you see it on a bar chart, you can see domestic stocks bigger than domestic bonds. Even when you don't have the amounts there, it's clearly easy to compare the different categories. So that's something to consider there.